There's like so many kinds of xenomorphs out there. Some are born from humans, some from animals and aliens like predators and engineers. Hell, some xenomorphs in comics have burst out of Batman's rogues gallery. So you see, there's really a lot of Xenos who are humanoid in form, some more than others. And in this video, we're going to discuss exactly that. So, without building a very long intro, but before we go into our explanation, we do have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The Offspring, Romulus. The Offspring from the 2024 movie Alien Romulus by Fede Alvarez is one hell of a beast that can make even the strongest of colonial marines shit their pants, and then some more. Oh, but young Rain took down the beast, so I believe plot armor can be the most powerful weapon. Nevertheless, in the movie, a group of scavengers from the Jackson Star Mining Company ventured into the Weyland-Yutani Corporation space station Renaissance in the hopes of finding stuff to salvage. But more importantly, they needed fuel for cryotubes. What they didn't anticipate was stumbling into a xenomorph infestation. Amid the chaos, one of the team members, Kay, was injured and captured by a xenomorph, only to be imprisoned in a hive. Fortunately, she was later found and rescued by her companions, Rain and the synthetic Andy. In a desperate bid to survive and save her unborn child, Kay injected herself with Z01, a mutagenic compound the team had been tasked with retrieving by their android science officer Rook. If you're new to the franchise, Z01 was basically a refined form of the black goo that mutates everything it comes in contact with. This injection led to the development of a human xenomorph hybrid inside of Kay. In other words, her fetus was getting mutated into a monstrosity. After escaping the crumbling station aboard their ship, the Corbelan 4, Kay was placed in stasis by Carradine to prevent further complications. However, the mutation from the Z01 triggered an alert in the cryopod, and when Carradine opened it, Harrison gave birth to a cocoon housing the mutated hybrid. Carradine tried to discard the cocoon in the ship's cargo bay, but before she could, the creature emerged. The hybrid attacked Andy and returned to Kay to feed on more Z01 that was oozing out of her in the form of breast milk. Needless to say, Kay did not survive this. In a final confrontation, Rain lured the hybrid back into the cargo bay and managed to inject the entire module into space, finally killing the monstrous creature. The Offspring underwent a rapid and disturbing transformation. It was live-birthed in a cocoon that resembled an ovomorph, from which it hatched, leaving behind a pool of acidic fluid. Initially, the creature had a grotesque resemblance to a human baby, but it quickly metamorphosized into something far more horrifying. As it matured, the Offspring grew at least 8 feet tall, even taller than the largest engineers and non-queen xenomorphs. To know how we know it was 8 feet tall and about other super interesting features about its anatomy, check out our video on the Offspring's anatomy. Its body was unnaturally thin, with a crooked upper torso that slanted to the right. The creature's appearance was a grotesque blend of xenomorph and engineer, with a pale humanoid form covered in biomechanical features. It had a short xenomorph-like tail, armor plating along its spine, and dorsal tubes on its back. Its face bore a striking resemblance to an engineer, with pronounced brow ridges, a high nose bridge, pure black eyes, and pale skin. The Offspring's teeth, though human-like in shape, had the metallic sheen characteristic of xenomorphs. Its hands and feet were equipped with sharp hooked claws, and it had a retractable toothed tongue that could be used for feeding or attacking. Despite its gaunt appearance, the Offspring possessed immense strength and was capable of smashing through metal doors and disabling synthetics with a single slash. The creature also survived the vacuum of space and endured asteroid debris for a time. Human Xenomorph Hybrid, aka the Newborn. Introduced in Alien Resurrection, the Newborn was quite a creation, especially considering the era it was brought to life. Essentially, it was the twisted result of DNA splicing experiments conducted by the scientists of the United Systems military. Going back to Alien 3, Ripley was impregnated with a queen xenomorph chest burster. The company tried to convince her to let them extract the embryo, but she refused and sacrificed herself to kill it. Fast forward 200 200 years, and the USM scientists managed to clone Ripley, Ripley 8. Due to the DNA splicing, Ripley had some xenomorph traits, and the queen chestburster inside her inherited some human traits. When the scientists extracted the embryo from Ripley 8, they kept both her and the queen alive for study. The queen, now having absorbed some of Ripley's human DNA, evolved to develop a uterus, allowing her to reproduce in a more human-like way, alongside her usual egg-laying. This led to the birth of the newborn, a grotesque blend of xenomorph and human characteristics. The newborn didn't recognize the queen as its mother, brutally killing her right after it was born. Instead, it latched onto Ripley 8, seeing her as its true maternal figure. But Ripley wasn't having any of that. She cleverly lured the newborn into a trap and used her acidic blood to create a breach in a window, ultimately sending the creature to a gruesome death in the vacuum of space. The newborn was pretty different when compared to the typical xenomorphs. The most obvious point of difference was its humanoid appearance. Unlike other xenomorphs, it wasn't born through the usual process involving ovomorphs, facehuggers, and chestbursters. It was a live birth, and its physical form reflected that. Larger and stronger than a warrior xenomorph, the newborn had a shorter, more human-like skull fused to its upper back, complete with eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Many key xenomorph traits, like the tail, inner jaw, and dorsal tubes, were missing. Its pale, fleshy skin also lacked the biomechanical texture usually seen in xenomorphs, and its teeth were closer to human, though it still had large, fang-like structures. It stood upright like a human as well. What really set the newborn apart, though, was its emotional capacity. Unlike the cold, instinct-driven xenomorphs, the newborn could express a range of emotions: curiosity, affection, anger, and even sorrow. It formed a strong attachment to Ripley 8, and, despite its violent nature, showed a childlike innocence. After committing brutal acts, it would often curiously interact with the remains of its victims, unaware of the consequences of its actions. Its behavior reflected the naive cruelty of a child who hasn't yet learned right from wrong. Elden, Prometheus, Fire and Stone. In the Prometheus, Fire and Stone comic book saga, Elden, a construct, is pretty much the central character and a close friend to astrobiologist Francis Lane. Francis, who is suffering from a worsening medical condition, trusts Elden deeply and shares his secret with him. As the crew of the Geryon approaches LV-223, Francis becomes obsessed with finding a cure for his illness. Eventually, Elden watches as Francis discovers a lake of black goo, yet the same substance capable of mutating life forms and holding immense regenerative power. Despite Elden's warnings about the dangers of the goo, Francis insists on taking a sample, convinced it might save him. Elden, loyal yet cautious, allows a drop of the black goo to be injected into him because Francis believed that Elden's synthetic body would be able to control the volatile effects of the mutagen. But Francis, the lying son of a witch, emptied the entire syringe into Elden, which brutally transformed the synthetic. Elden mutated into a powerful, grotesque humanoid after being exposed to the black goo. Stripped of most of his skin, his body was a blend of white and reddish tones, with tendrils that later developed into an extra set of arms. His transformation gave him the ability to fight xenomorphs and yautjas simultaneously, regenerate instantly from injuries, and even morph his body into weapons, like creating a mouth on his stomach to bite a yautja. Elden also gained limited control over the xenomorphs, reflecting their skeletal appearance in his altered form. Despite his terrifying abilities, his mutation was a tragic consequence of trusting his friend Francis, who used him for dangerous experiments. This betrayal sent Elden into a violent frenzy, leading to the deaths of many survivors. However, after Francis's death, Elden gradually regained some control and sacrificed himself to help the others. The Rogue. The Rogue was the end result of gene splicing experiments at Charon Base, part of Project Chimera led by Professor Kleist. While Kleist had some success creating hybrid drone xenomorphs that were genetically engineered to be more controllable, he faced major difficulties when trying to create a queen hybrid. Many of the attempts resulted in deformities that couldn't survive. The breakthrough came when Kleist incorporated human DNA, specifically using material from John Cray. The outcome was the Rogue, an enormous and powerful male xenomorph, a supposed king designed to be a tame counterpart to the natural queens. At first, it seemed Kleist's belief in the rogue's docility was confirmed as the creature didn't harm Cray, who was left bound in its containment cell. However, things took a brutal turn when several natural xenomorph drones were introduced into the chamber. Instead of exerting any kind of control over them, the rogue flew into a violent rage and ripped the drones apart with ease. Kleist quickly realized that the rogue's indifference to Cray was simply because it didn't see him as a threat, not because it was tame. When the rogue encountered a queen from a nearby hive, the two seemed to challenge each other for dominance. The creature smashed out of its containment cell and rampaged through Charon Base, killing anyone in its path as it hunted for the queen. While not intentionally targeting humans, the rogue destroyed anything and anyone who got in his way. Breaking through the airlock into the hive, the rogue was relentless and slaughtered the queen's royal guard before finally facing off against the queen herself. In the end, the queen emerged victorious, defeating the rogue in a fierce battle. Dr. Reinstodt. Dr. Niels Reinstodt, a notorious gene-splicing mad scientist from Mega City 1, once posed as part of the Department of Disease Eradication. Under this guise, he injected orphans with a dangerous DNA-altering substance instead of the promised Radpox vaccine, claiming it was a successful experiment. When the judges uncovered his twisted stunt, Reinstodt took a child hostage, threatening the entire city. Judge Dredd seemingly put an end to him, but 5 years later, it was revealed that the Dr. Reinstodt Dredd executed was a decoy, a puppet infused with the doctor's own DNA and drugged into homicidal madness to buy the real Reinstodt time to escape. In the present day, Reinstodt has undergone horrific transformation, merging his DNA with xenomorph, spider, and human traits to become a monstrous queen hybrid. He's not working alone either. Through his gene splicing experiments, he creates a horrifying array of Animen xenomorphs and even a Predalien. With these abominations at his side, he forms a dark alliance with Archbishop Emoji, pushing his nightmarish creations to the next level. Two-Face Xenomorph, a Poison Ivy Xenomorph, and a Joker Xenomorph from Batman Aliens 2. 70 years later in Gotham, DeCristo Constructions hits the jackpot, or rather, a nightmare. While digging, they uncover a basement sealed tighter than Fort Knox, with 6-foot walls, iron bands, and ship-grade steel. Curious, Stephen DeCristo himself bails on a swanky dinner with Gotham's elite, including Bruce Wayne, to check it out. They break through the door using acid and hammers, only to unleash a scene straight out of a horror flick. Inside, it's like Frankenstein's lab on steroids, complete with one major problem: a xenomorph ready to make a meal out of the crew. When Batman catches wind of the carnage, he investigates, finding a massacre. Bodies shredded like someone used chainsaws, blood everywhere, and something that had burst out of one of the professor's corpses. The airtight room had preserved everything perfectly, except the scene screamed xenomorph. Gotham just got a lot more dangerous. As Batman digs into the mystery, he finds the Xenomorph's hive in the 9th Street subway, right near the construction site. Cocooned victims and more of those alien killers are lurking, waiting to hatch more horrors. Batman jumps into battle, taking on a swarm of Xenos. It's a brutal fight, but he manages to escape with just a few tears in his suit, realizing that Gotham's nightmare is far from over. He rescues 3 potential chestburster hosts, bringing them to the hospital just in time. Enter Dr. Catherine Fortune, a mysterious figure with a past even Batman can't crack. Turns out, she's far from ordinary. Catherine is a hybrid, part human, part alien queen, thanks to an encounter on an old Antarctic trip. A queen chestburster inside her never fully emerged, granting her super strength, agility, and agelessness. The military knew about her since World War II, keeping tabs on her as she blended in with high-profile figures. Her pet project? Mixing her own alien DNA with Gotham's worst, creating hybrid versions of Arkham Asylum's Rogues Gallery. Villains like Two-Face, Mr. Freeze, Scarecrow, Poison Ivy, and the Joker were transformed into monstrous alien hybrids, all wired to see Catherine as their queen. Gotham's about to face a whole new breed of chaos. the Anchor Point hybrid, aka Body Burster. This particular Xenomorph variant is a game changer in how it's born and how it looks. Unlike the typical chest burster, this creature wasn't implanted into a host. Instead, its DNA was fused with human DNA at the molecular level to create an ovomorph. When it encounters a host, it liquefies and releases spores into the air, infecting anyone nearby. After several hours, the host undergoes a brutal transformation, with a Xenomorph bursting from their body. Physically, this hybrid looks a bit different due to its human DNA. It has small, beady red eyes, a more human-like nose, and a flexible inner jaw. Its vocalizations aren't quite like those of its Xenomorph counterparts. The creature's fingers are also more human-like, with 6 individual fingers instead of the typical paired structure. Unlike other Xenomorphs, it doesn't lay eggs or cocoon its victims. Instead, it chooses to maim or injure its intended host. Although it can still produce residue, it does so in a completely different way. In a bizarre twist, during the chaos aboard Anchor Point Station, a Xenomorph drone chose to kill the hybrid rather than the nearby humans. It viciously clawed its face and tore it apart, adding another layer of mystery to this new breed of Xenomorph. Eloise. Eloise was a unique creation, a vat-grown android with Xenomorph DNA developed by Dr. Fred Lichtner at the Agilum facility on Cerberus 503. Lichtner's groundbreaking experiment comprised infecting a Xenomorph egg with a biological computer virus using leprosy spores, which allowed him to alter specific DNA chains. Instead of producing a typical Xenomorph, the result was Eloise, a humanoid android with a mix of Xenomorph traits. She quickly became an invaluable tool for Dr. Lichtner in his research, especially in studying how dry leprosy could halt the final development of Xenomorph embryos implanted in human hosts. However, when the facility was taken over by Adelaide and Bombay Holdings Alliance, things took a dark turn. Eloise, initially compliant due to her android nature, soon found herself in conflict. As the Alliance began slaughtering both the remaining Xenomorphs and infected lepers, Eloise's Xenomorph Queen DNA awakened. She began to feel their pain as if it was her own. Overcome by her primal instincts, Eloise rebelled, massacring Alliance personnel and leading the surviving Xenomorphs and lepers in a bloody uprising against their new masters. Eloise appeared mostly human. She dressed like one, spoke like one, and had the same complexity and sapience as any individual. However, her Xenomorph DNA was evident in certain features. Her hands were shaped like the Xenomorph claws, and her back sported those signature dorsal spines. It was a striking mix of human and alien, giving her an unsettling edge that went far beyond appearance. Thanks to her hybrid nature, Eloise possessed extraordinary strength, speed, and agility, an advantage from both her android and Xenomorph sides. Her Queen DNA granted her a telepathic link with Xenomorphs, making them instinctively follow her lead. With her intelligence and natural connection to the creatures, she turned even small groups of Xenomorphs into deadly, well-organized forces, capable of taking down an entire Yautja hunting party. Unlike most synthetics, Eloise was not bound by typical behavioral restrictions. She had her own will and could disobey orders, making her a free agent. Her connection with the Xenomorphs was deep. She genuinely cared for them, seeing herself as their protector and even expressing a kind of love for the creatures. She also took on a motherly role for the impregnated lepers and their offspring, a fierce protector of her strange, twisted family. In addition to her physical abilities, Eloise was skilled in firearms and piloting space shuttles. With her calculating mind and fierce survival instincts, she was a deadly force, blending the cunning of a synthetic with the primal ferocity of a Xenomorph queen. Bugmen from Aliens, Colonial Marines. The Bugmen were a twisted cult led by Ernst Kleist, who later adopted the name Father. This group had made a name for themselves by terrorizing a sector of space with their human-alien hybrids. The hybrids were the result of long-term exposure to Xenomorph royal jelly, which mutated them heavily, giving them limited influence over the Xenomorphs and the ability to communicate with them. The Bugmen helped the Xenomorphs spread their infestation and regularly clashed with human colonies, kidnapping survivors to transform them into more of their kind. The The reign of the Bugmen ended when Lieutenant Joseph Henry and his squad of Marines made the ultimate sacrifice, destroying the cult's base and taking Kleist down with it. Physically, the Bugmen were grotesque, their prolonged mutation giving them a disfigured, deformed appearance. They had a strange pink or purplish-gray skin, oversized heads with enlarged ear holes, and most had lost all their hair, except for a few strands. Some had tendrils hanging from their heads, adding to their alien appearance. Kleist, as the leader, bore a biomechanical crown that had formed on his scalp, solidifying his disturbing transformation. White hybrid xenomorphs, their king, and the trophy hatchling. Alien Predator, Deadliest of the Species, written by Chris Claremont, is like Thelma and Louise, but with extra firepower and even more attitude. The comic spans 12 issues, making it a bit longer than your typical Alien vs. Predator story, and introduces a bunch of firsts. Most notably, it's the first time we see Predators and Xenomorphs working together with humans to face an even bigger threat, the White Hybrids. These hybrids took their sweet time to show up, but when they did, they were definitely worth the wait. The story is set on a future version of Earth where xenomorphs have taken over, making the planet completely uninhabitable. The rich and powerful escape to a massive space cruiser called the Liberté, where life goes on for the elite. One of these rich guys, Lucien Delacroix, creates a genetically engineered trophy wife, Karen, who happens to look exactly like a woman named Ash Parnell. Ash had designed Toy, a super intelligent AI system and the main villain in the story. Toy was originally created to make people's dreams a reality, but over time, it got corrupted. Toy plays a key role in creating the White Hybrids, which are part xenomorph, part predator, and part human, blending the worst traits of each species. These hybrids become the ultimate nightmare, and that's when the real fight for survival kicks off. The White Hybrids, much like xenomorphs, operated with eusocial structure, basically like bees and ants, with one leader and a bunch of workers. But these guys had acidic blood too, though it wasn't as deadly as your typical xenomorph. The main difference? Their leader was a king, not a queen. Unlike xenomorphs, where a drone or Praetorian can turn into a queen and start laying eggs, the White Hybrid king couldn't do that. He needed queens, but not to rule. He just wanted them to pump out eggs and build his army. And how do we know this? Well, unlike the usual xenomorphs, the king could speak fluent English, though it had a creepy xenomorph-like voice, and was even capable of using human weapons. The king was massive, but his drones weren't mindless either. They were smart, could talk, and knew how to handle weapons. Plus, they had predator-like mandibles, making them even freakier. The White Hybrids were up against Karen Delacroix, a few humans, a female predator named Big Mama, and a xenomorph queen. The queen was only on their side because Karen had a queen embryo growing inside her, and the White Hybrids wanted to kill her before that chestburster arrived. And Big Mama? She wasn't just battling xenomorphs, she hated the White Hybrids even more because they were part predator, which in her culture is seen as a monstrous abomination. In the end, the chestburster inside Karen took out the White Hybrid king, while the drones were wiped out by the combined efforts of everyone else. Deacon. In 2089, archaeologists Elizabeth Shaw and Charlie Holloway uncover ancient star maps from multiple extinct human cultures, believing them to be an invitation from an alien race known as the Engineers. Intrigued, Wayland Corporation CEO Peter Wayland funds a mission aboard the advanced ship Prometheus to find these mysterious beings. The crew, monitored by the android David, awakens in 2093 when they reach a distant moon, LV-223. Their mission was to find the creators of humanity. Upon exploring a massive structure on the moon, they discover strange ampules, a giant humanoid statue, and the corpses of alien beings thought to be the Engineers. As the crew investigates, David secretly swipes one of the ampules filled with a mysterious dark liquid. Unbeknownst to the others, he infects Holloway with the substance, which later results in Shaw becoming pregnant with a bizarre alien creature. David eventually finds an engineer still alive alive in hypersleep, and Wayland reveals he's been on the ship the whole time, hoping to ask the engineer for immortality. When the crew awakens the engineer, things go terribly wrong. He decapitates David, kills Wayland, and plans to complete his mission to wipe out humanity. And a remaining crew crashes the Prometheus into the engineer's ship, destroying it. The engineer, however, survives and chases Shaw, but she fights back by releasing the trilobite, a creature she had been impregnated with. The trilobite attacks and impregnates the engineer, leading to the birth of a new alien species, the Deacon. Shaw escapes as the sole survivor of the failed expedition. Fast forward to 2219, over a century later, and a new crew aboard the ship Geryon lands on LV-223, seeking to salvage what's left. But their mission spirals into chaos when they discover that the Deacon has merged with the ruins of Prometheus, transforming into a living, monstrous mountain. Now trapped inside this colossal organic structure, the survivors, including Captain Angela Foster and a few others, must fight to escape. Neomorphs. After the events of Prometheus, David left LV-223 and traveled to another celestial body. This place was altered by the black goo, which terraformed the planet and led to the creation of fungus-like egg sacs that burst into spores when disturbed. These spores then entered a host through their orifices to cause the growth of a blood burster inside the host's chest cavity, which would later burst the host's body to come out into the open. The blood burster and its mature form are called Neomorphs. In fact, even a hammerpede is a Neomorph variant. Although the process of reproduction is similar to that of Xenomorphs, the Neomorphs have a more organic appearance as opposed to the biomechanical appearance of the Xenomorphs. An infant Neomorph has a bulbous head and walks on all fours, but as it matures, the head becomes more pointy and it assumes a bipedal stance. The spiked tail of a Neomorph makes it a force to reckon with because the tail is capable of slashing and even battering down weapons. Much like Xenomorphs, a Neomorph's physical appearance depends on the host it gestated inside. Neomorphs are far more beastly and animalistic than Xenomorphs. While the Xenomorphs use stealth and surprise to slay their victims, a Neomorph's primary agenda is slaughtering anything that moves, and this makes them less intelligent than Xenomorphs. Another major difference is the fact that Neomorphs actively consume human flesh for survival, while Xenomorphs don't really eat their victims. Elizabeth Shaw. After leaving LV-223, Shaw and David continued their journey and ended up on Planet 4, where they found a large engineer population. But things took a dark turn when David unleashed a biological attack, wiping out the engineers as a twisted gift to Shaw. Horrified by his actions, Shaw turned against him, which led David to use her in his genetic experiments, trying to transform her into something beyond human. Despite his attempts to keep her alive during these gruesome trials, Shaw eventually died. David, in a strange tribute, buried her in the Citadel's garden and honored her death through ritualistic gestures. Years later, when the crew of the USCSS Covenant arrived, Daniels stumbled upon Shaw's preserved and grotesquely mutated remains in David's lab. Her tragic fate was later discovered, but ultimately covered up in the Weyland-Yutani report. Catherine Fortune. Dr. Catherine Fortune became the host of a queen chestburster during an Antarctic expedition in 1928. Due to her condition, the chestburster never fully matured, as a mild case of dry leprosy slowed its growth. Rather than removing the creature, Dr. Fortune allowed it to remain within her, which drastically enhanced her physical abilities, making her faster, stronger, and fitter than a normal human. These changes also extended her lifespan, allowing her to retain her youth well into the 21st century, though her hair had turned gray. The military took an interest in her early on, and she spent decades working for them. By modern times, Dr. Fortune had aligned herself with a secretive global network of powerful individuals looking to develop deterrence against potential superheroes. Using her altered DNA, she conducted experiments to create spliced xenomorphs. She also used the DNA of notorious Arkham Asylum villains, Two-Face, the Joker, Poison Ivy, Scarecrow, and Mr. interferes to produce a team of 5 sentient, highly combat-trained Xenomorph hybrids. These creatures instinctively obeyed her due to the DNA she had added to their creation. In a battle against Batman on an offshore oil rig, her hybrids were killed, but things took a disastrous turn when a 6th Xenomorph hybrid, made from Killer Croc's DNA, was accidentally free. Miscalculating its behavior, Fortune believed it would imprint on her like the others, but the creature instead decapitated her in a violent misunderstanding, bringing her experiments to a brutal end. Predalien. The Predalien is a deadly hybrid, born when a Xenomorph infects a Yautja host. This creature inherits many of the Yautja's physical traits, like their dreadlocks, mandibles, and lighter skin tone, but with all the ferocity of a Xenomorph. Thanks to the natural strength of the Yautja, Predaliens are even more powerful than the typical human-spawned Xenomorphs. They're fierce in combat, and their existence is incredibly rare. However, the Yautja absolutely despise Predaliens. To them, these hybrids are an insult to their honor and pride. If word spreads that a Predalien exists, it becomes an immediate mission for the Yautja to hunt it down, no matter the cost. Killing a Predalien isn't about earning a trophy, it's about erasing a disgrace. To the Yautja, Predaliens should never exist. The most common version of this hybrid is the warrior or drone-like Predalien, which is even stronger than its Yautja host. It takes a highly skilled and heavily armed Yautja to stand a chance against one of these monstrous hybrids, making the hunt all the more dangerous. And that was our list of all 15 humanoid Xenos. I know that a few, like Elizabeth Shaw and the Predalien, may seem like they don't fit on this list, but the former got super mutated and the latter is humanoid. Still, let me know what you think. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.